Any volunteers to take a right hand from Deontay Wilder? No, I didn't think so. This is After the Bell, Mirror Fighting's boxing show in association with Betfair.
Hey, it's the WBA heavyweight champion of the world.
Move like a butterfly, sting like a bee.
Welcome to After the Bell. The band is back together this week, and there's plenty to talk about, but before we do, I want to ask you both a question. I've stolen it from Twitter, shamelessly admit it. Would you rather one right hand from Deontay Wilder or a 5-punch combination from Vasily Lomachenko?
The Lomachenko combination I'll have. It's likely that you'll still be awake at the end of it, but nothing's guaranteed from Wilder. Oh, Jesus, no.
Yeah, I'd do the same. I'd just think about that mascot that he hit. The big squidgy shark or whatever it was. I think he had to have 6 months off. And I wouldn't even, unless you could put me in a mascot costume, I'd think about it. But I'd take the Lomachenko. I reckon I could probably evade most of them anyway.
Oh, well, we'll see if we can set that one up. Serious stuff now. Callum Smith, John Ryder at the weekend. Callum Smith held on to his super middleweight world title. We thought narrowly, everyone thought narrowly, apart from the 3 judges. 2 scored it 116, 112, and then inexplicably 117, 111. Before we get on to Callum Smith and the judging and the state of that, let's give John Ryder some credit, George. You said last week that, there might be an upset, but he would at least perform above expectations. Were you impressed with what you saw?
Yeah, John Ryder boxed really well. What I was most impressed with is that he obviously had a game plan that he had to go in and he executed it really well. Smith, he gave so much height against Smith, and Smith is a big puncher. So there was certain things that obviously he'd been working on in camp that he had to bring into the fight and stick to and not make the mistakes. He covers distance really well, so he jumps in and out of range really well. He has this sort of, I'm trying to figure out which fighter from past that he reminds me of. That he's got that old school sort of style where he leans in and out of range, and most fighters would work for, because they would read that in and out lean and they might try and counter off it. Smith is unable to do that, so he's got this in and out range and great lateral head movement, which causes Smith problems the entire night. Even in the later rounds when you're supposed to be slowing up, he's still making him miss with lateral head movement. He covers real distance real quick, so he has a real quick step in, change of pace, and then once he's in, he's not actually necessarily looking for power shots off the bat. I think, it looked like he would just come in to touch Smith, and the bigger shots are coming round the side once he's in underneath Smith, and he's there, he's letting his power shots go, and they never really had any real effect. In the 11th, he looked like he hurt Smith, but up until that point, they're just sort of like good, solid scoring shots that should have been winning in rounds. I felt, we weren't going to talk about the scores, but
go on.
117, 111. As that first score's lifted, I was looking at. What that means. That means they're going heavy in Smith's favour. Yeah. No one really understands that. I was following the fight online as well to get people's reactions, and there's almost like a look on Ryder's face of say, what was the point? I hope he ain't as miserable as me, or at least that's what my wife said. Because I hope he takes something from that fight, and he rightly should do. But at that point, you're like, what's the point? And the other two, even 116, 113, Ryder knows that he ain't getting that sort of win at this point. And I'd imagine it's been a long time coming for Ryder to get this opportunity to fight in a big prestigious fight. He must be really, really, really gutted, really, really disappointed.
I don't think no one is calling it a robbery. I think 2 rounds either way or a draw would have been fair. You did have Smith winning, Declan, but I'm sure you can.
I had it 6-5 and 1 even personally, but there was obviously close rounds in there. What's happened is that mad scorecard has made the other 2 seem okay, and really, when you look at them, you're like, wow, really, is that two guys? All 3 of them have scored it pretty comfortably for Smith, and it doesn't tell, as much as I hate the phrase, a story of the fight whatsoever. But what I do think happened a little bit is that it reminds me a bit of Katie Taylor against Delphine Pursoon in that you expected less almost from Ryder. You didn't expect that from Ryder, for him to make it such of a fight. So there's a couple of rounds which are close, for me anyway, and I've watched it back and re-scored it. A couple of rounds that are close and you think, wow, that was good from Ryder, because I didn't expect him to do that. I'll give him that round. When really, in the cold light of day, if you score it, there's a couple where I think Smith's edged it. Obviously, it's a very close fight, and it's not a robbery. And I don't think anyone should be calling it a robbery of a result. What we've been robbed of, or rather what John Ryder's been robbed of, is any sort of real credit for that fight. Because you look on BoxRec, Smith, easy win, straightforward, unanimous decision, and people say, yeah, but Ryder's gained a lot from it because, like you say, there's, credit from the fans and everyone saying it was a robbery and stuff. But I think it's actually the opposite of that, because now people look at him and go, do we want to fight him? Is anyone going to give him a voluntary shot? I wouldn't have thought so. Even his promoter's not even lobbying for a rematch. So you think, what's he going to do from there? He's going to have to now battle back into a mandatory position. He's been working so hard, and the outcry on Twitter, which is, there's one thing that Twitter is good for. It does generate a good old outcry. People watch it on Saturday night and they go, oh my God, it's another disgrace. I'll send a tweet out. And then they go, oh, that's boxing's so rubbish. Turn their phone off, go to bed, wake up, get on with their lives. But John Ryder has put his whole everything into that. His whole life was building up to that world title shot. And he gets that on the end of it and then just expected to get on with his life. It's an absolute joke. It's a total... And people who maybe were watching boxing for the first time or are not that au fait with what's going on will look at it and be like, what is the point of this sport? Like, what is going on here? Because that was not a reflection of what we saw. And okay, you can say Smith, like me, I thought Smith won the fight, but you can't just go, well, he won the fight, so forget the scorecards, he's still the champion. It's just, and we talk about it too much, and that's what sometimes it just brings you down a little bit, because you think, well, you can't just talk about it because it's never going to change. I don't know how you could possibly change it.
George, there's a saying in boxing that the challenger has to really win the fight, not just win a fight. No, hang on. You can't just win the fight. He's got to, especially in the backyard of the champion, he's got to go there as a champion. Did you feel that you should have been given the benefit of the doubt in close rounds?
Not necessarily. If you're a judge, I suppose you're looking to see who's won that round, and to score it even, it must literally be even. You know what I mean? And at that point, if you've got a couple of even rounds, and at the end of the fight, you look at it, you might go, I'll edge it with the champion. The challenger had to maybe do a tiny bit more, but in my opinion, no. It should be much more black and white as who won that round, and what are you scoring? What sort of judge are you looking for? Are you the guy who just wants to see an accumulation of punches? Do you want to see the person who controls and dictates the pace and the pressure of the fight? Do you want that guy who lands the more power shots? So they might be getting their head knocked back continuously with a jab, but they've landed 2 stiff left hooks and a big right hand at the end of the round, and they've won that round. It wasn't even really like, for me, and again, it wasn't a robbery, but I made Ryder a winner on the cards. I thought he edged it by a couple of rounds, and he finished stronger as well. So you're talking about the champion. Sometimes the judges look to who finishes the championship round stronger, and then in this case, it definitely was John Ryder. Smith, time and time again he's been flat. Throughout his career, he's synonymous for it. In recent interviews, he's talked about pressure getting to him when he's expected to win, and he'll rise to the occasion when need be. And he's been put on a real high pedestal now. Lots of people talking about him as a real contender. He's considered the number one in the division. Because he beat me and I was number one division at the time. But it took me a long time to fight my way into that sort of situation. And, I always have to be careful what I say, because, you have to take losses with grace. But he's had a lot of flat performances. I don't know if that's down to his training or down to him being really tight at the weight, or just not being able to rise to the occasion in particular fights. But this was a homecoming for him. It was back in Liverpool. It was headlining on Sky Sports. It was a domestic dust up. If you can't really get up for this, it's real strange. And as I said last week, John Ryder, to his credit, had sort of boxed himself into this position. Never really been involved in huge fights, never headlined, but had sort of delivered every time it had been asked of him. You know, he had a good win over Jamie Cox. He had a win over the Danish lad who he boxed, who was
Nielsen.
Yeah, Nielsen, who was you know, the Sauerlands were developing over a long course of time, and so yeah, you know, a loss is a loss. But if it was a split decision loss, or there was only a round in it, then at least Ryder himself and his team could come away and go, do you know what, we were really close, and you know, maybe if this was changed, or maybe if I pushed a bit harder here, you know, I could have got it. But to come away with only a 3-round it's not enough. It's not good enough, as you only won 3 rounds of the fight, and you can't say there was a couple of close rounds, so we're going to give it to the champion. In my opinion, I think it needs to be more clinical than that, much more clinical than that.
So you mentioned, Declan, we're not quite sure what to do about the judging. It will be quickly forgotten, won't it? We've got it's a reasonably quiet weekend this weekend, but then move on to Josh, so he's going to take up all the news space. John Ryder will come back to London and just sort of go back into the shadows, and the judges, once again, will not come under scrutiny. They'll be back doing fights this weekend. Is it time now for some accountability, some sort of explanation as to why they scored the fight as they did?
Well, yeah, maybe. And just going back to that phrase about the champion, you know, the challenger has to rip a title away, it's just like one of the worst phrases in boxing. It's just total rubbish, because there's clear, okay, it's a subjective sport, but there are clear conventions to how you judge a fight. We've all seen them: ring generalship, effective aggression, defense, power shots. So you sit there and you watch it and you go, right, who's doing this? Who's doing these categories? How is he doing it? And okay, everyone's in different positions, so you're seeing a different perspective of the fight, and you might, like you say, it's what you like. Do you like the effective aggression of someone landing a couple of jabs, or are we looking for one power shot, or whatever it might be? So there is a little bit of leeway, but to see scores like that, and sometimes, you know, when you get one guy score, you know, big swings in the cards, it just shows that there's a sort of incompetency there, really. They're not adhering to the rules and the guidelines, which are absolutely set out to do it. And the only way you can really do it, and it's a bit like referees in football, is you get them up in front of the press. But is that ever going to happen? And will that work? And anyway, will that even solve anything? I think, without wishing to cast aspersion, was it Terry O'Connell was the wide scorecard? Yeah. If you really interviewed him afterwards and said, what was all that about, Tell? He's going to go, well, you know, I saw the fight and this is how I saw it. I mean, what else can he say? Yeah. He is watching it, and no one's getting paid. It's not corrupt. I'm absolutely sure of that. You'll have a better view of that as being inside the sport as a professional fighter, but it's just something wrong there. There's got to be something wrong there, because how do you possibly go around changing that? Someone sat there and watched it from 3 feet away and gone, oh yeah, Callum Smith won that easy one every round. Yeah, another one for Smith, another one for Smith. I don't know how he's done it. I don't know what he's watching. So how do you even go about trying to change it? In football, they can chuck in VAR and try and sort it out like that, but in boxing there's no fix for it. Yeah, there really isn't.
I generally think that you can be sort of pre-designed to be believing something. Yeah, you know, when we look at the odds last week and Smith was 1-20 on, you're not. You're either going to chuck a few quid on Ryder.
Definitely.
It's throwaway money. If it comes in, it's a lottery. But 1-20, you're not going to be encouraged to back Smith, when really on paper, you know, Smith could be odds on favourite because he's been in the big fights. But maybe 1-2, 1-3 would have been much more.
The judges know that, don't they?
Yeah.
The judges know that. They'll know, whoa, Smith's 20-1 on here. He's a huge favourite here. So anything he does, okay, is good, like especially in the early rounds. And I think Andy Lee, who was on CoComs, gave the first 3 to Ryder, but there were 3 close rounds. I can't remember what the scorecards are, but that's the sort of ones where the judges have turned up and they've gone, right, Smith is the champion here. He's done enough to win that one. He's done enough to win that one. When really, had he? Andy Lee sat there and given them all 3 to Ryder. So it does show that how different people can see it. But I think you're 100% true in that they can turn up the judges with an idea of how the fight should be going in their heads, and that is only going to sway. And also what happens with the crowd, we say it every time, Callum lands a shot or misses a shot and the crowd goes up, Ryder can land a lovely shot, no one even, you know, bats an eyelid, and so it doesn't register with the judges necessarily. And that's just the problem with the sport, isn't it? What you got to do is get power like George and start knocking people out. And then there's no, we'll get onto Wilder later, but then there's no discussion, is there? But other than that, you really are putting your life in other people's hands, and especially for Ryder, who's worked so hard. Those wins you said, Jack Armfield, people like that, where he's not even expected to win. He got there, he got his chance. What a performance, performed out of his skin, got nothing to show for it.
We'll look at what's next for them both. Now, let's just start with Ryder. It's a long road back, isn't it? He's not going to shout about this. I don't imagine. He doesn't come across as that kind of guy. So he's now looking at another run to get into a mandatory position, probably 3 or 4 fights. He isn't going to sell loads of tickets, so he's going to rely on undercards. I mean, would you have the energy to do it again?
Yeah, I mean, I think he will. I think he definitely will, because he suffered a couple of losses on his way up to the top, and this would be a loss that he'd be disappointed with, that may take a little while to overcome, but he'll know now just how close he did come, and that will be the thing that I believe will spur him on the most. Even though as an opponent you might not necessarily want to pick him, but there'll be a lot of fighters out there that will look at him and say, well, I'm going to do a much better job than Callum Smith did. I can beat this guy, and therefore then their value will rise, and that will be the champions as well that want to come in against John Ryder, I believe. He's fan friendly to watch. He's been with Eddie Hearn and Matchroom for a long time now, and I'm sure Eddie will want to do right by him by a certain degree, and feel that after that performance against Smith, he didn't get the nod, but he deserves to be still carried on back in the mix. So going through the lists, I think a Saunders fight would be a great fight for him, and I think he could beat Joe Saunders up at super middleweight. I think he's moved up to the weight better. They both boxed, and it was a close fight when they fought the first time. But I think probably Saunders' amateur pedigree might have seen him over the line in that fight. I believe in a return it might be a different story. Much like Smith, Billy Joe Saunders blows hot and cold. He, in my opinion, he probably doesn't prepare properly for certain fights, and maybe if he was put him against Ryder, he might see it as, I've beat this guy already, I don't need to prepare properly, maybe crash the weight, not show up fit, and if he does that, he will come unstuck against John Ryder, who's always fit, always in great condition, physically very strong. That would be sort of the route that I would sort of be angling towards. Unfortunately for Ryder, he doesn't have the makeup to chase a fight, to announce a fight, to create a sort of a public demand for it. So he might not be able to necessarily push himself into those opportunities. But I think if I was him, I'd be looking at Billy Joe Saunders.
He is actually 1-2 with Betfair to win a world title, which largely, Declan, is based on Canelo Alvarez vacating his regular WBA belt. And actually, the first in line there is Fedor Chudinov, who George, you obviously know well.
That's a good fight.
Yeah.
It's a great fight. Very fun to watch. I think the question with him, obviously on Saturday, you saw the size of him, it was ridiculous, because obviously he's a career middleweight, really. And Callum Smith looks like someone who will probably end up at light heavyweight. But like you say, he's unbelievably strong. I think he's proved his credentials at super middleweight. He's working with Dan from Perform 365, someone you know well, and he lives the life, and he looked in amazing shape. Clearly, he got stronger as the fight went on. So the weight is right for him. Although he looks like a small one, he uses it to his advantage. He actually uses it against the tall guys like he did. It makes it really difficult for someone like Callum Smith to land anything on, because he's up close and then he's gone out to the side. So I think super middleweight is right for him. If Canelo does vacate that belt, if they're going to pay out on the regular belt, seems like a very good price. It's a really good, nice fight, that Fedor Chudinov. That'd be perfect for him, and hopefully he does it, because he's not like a big loud guy. He's not going to go around shouting about it. He barely even complained about the result on Saturday, and like, fair play to him, because he knows it won't get him anywhere. What's the point? He's just put everything on the line. It's like, so then I hope he does it. I hope he sticks at super middleweight. I think he's proved that's right for him, because to be honest, when they started on Saturday, I thought he looks too small for this weight, but I think he looked rock solid.
In terms of Callum Smith, there's a lot of talk about Anfield. There has been for a while, and the build-up was dominated by these plans to have a fight after the football season. But is there really the demand? I mean, Canelo, I think we've agreed, definitely is not going to come to Anfield, is it, George?
No. Canelo is a superstar, an absolute superstar in the States, and he will fight in the States, and that will be that. No one, and I can't really see any big stars coming over to give up a home advantage or neutral advantage to come to Liverpool and box Callum Smith. He's never been a particularly big draw. He doesn't have the personality sort of create a big a big fight. Liverpool are a pretty good football team these days. I mean, I doubt they really, even on the off season, they might not even want an event coming and messing up their pitch, and it would cost an absolute fortune. I think it's kind of just being mooted around at the moment because Callum Smith is deemed the number 1 division, and therefore and stadium fights are the in thing now, and having one in Liverpool would be, tick something off of Eddie Hearn or Frank Smith's bucket list. Maybe he's always putting up a new stadium. So I don't think that's logical. I think his big fights will be in the States. Smith, he's big. That's where the big money's at now. In the UK, you have to generate the money to be paid the money. Yeah, it's all down to ticket sales and pay-per-view buys. But he's not quite at pay-per-view headlining level at the moment. Not on the A side of it anyway. So he might have to go to the States and fight. He'll be out there boxing on his own show. And going through a list of fighters, some of these guys, I mean, these are great fights. But some of them are obviously with Al Heyman, so they might be more difficult to make. I'm not sure how long Smith's contract runs with Matchroom and whether, I'm sure he's happy and wants to stay there. But Benavidez fight, I think as a unification, that's very exciting. 5-1. Caleb Plant, who's a tricky operator, very fast, very slick. That'll be an interesting fight, a real interesting fight. Might not be the right fight for Callum Smith, as in, he don't need a guy like that. And then sort of Saunders top of the list again. Obviously both being part of the same camp now. But again, that probably them two as fighters probably get paid more to have it in the States than they do over here, because I'm sure Saunders will come up with some outrageous stuff, but is that enough to sell tickets and create pay-per-view buys, especially when Smith makes it his calling card to not really engage in any sort of verbals in a build-up of a fight. So
especially not with Billy Joe Saunders, someone he's known, known the family, been around the circuit as amateurs. It's not someone they're gone. It's not going to have that tension like we rightly sort of need in a domestic fight to generate that sort of ticket sales. Anfield's a big stadium. I suppose they're going to charge a load of money, like you said, because they don't really need it there. I just can't see them going to Anfield. I just couldn't see the fight that did it. Canelo's not going to come over. I guess Golovkin, being the big name he is, maybe, but even then,
is he going to want to come up to super middleweight?
Is he going to want to come up? And also, the thing is, Wembley resonates with a lot of these foreign guys. Yeah. They know it. I remember Andre Ward talking about Wembley because they know it. But a lot of people outside of England who aren't into football don't know what Anfield means. They don't have any desire. Oh yeah, I'd love to fight Anfield. They don't really care. So I think they'd struggle to get any of these guys apart from Saunders. And then you think, is Saunders Smith big enough for Anfield? For me, that strikes me as like an 0-2 fight, really. At the moment, anyway, we don't know what might happen. Maybe someone will throw a chair at a presser. No, seriously, that's probably will be enough to get it going. But the rest of the list, I guess, Ryder at 12-1. I think you should probably quadruple that price. I don't think we're going to see a rematch as much as we would love to. I just can't see it personally. And then you've got the Al Heyman problem with the other ones potentially. So it's a tough one. I guess Canelo might look at Smith and say he's got the belt, as in the real one. And then that's an opportunity for him to win that one at a fourth weight class. But it seems like they've skipped over super middleweight and gone regular belt. That'll do it. We're 4-time champion. That's fine. Yeah. So then they're not going to fight Smith. But they did fight Liam Smith. He has fought. It's not like he's only looking for superstars. There's always a little gap. Maybe he might get it. But like you said, I think he'd have to go to America for it.
So just to run through the list of next opponents for Callum Smith, Billy Joe Saunders is the 64 favourite. Gennady Golovkin 3-1. Benavidez 5-1. Caleb Plant 8-1. Canelo the outsider at 14-1.
Chris Eubank in there as well, 10s. What do you reckon to that?
I mean, Eubank's got his own little fight in a couple of weeks to come through first. I mean, why would you ever get involved with promoting a fight with Chris Eubank Jr.? Obviously, George, you fought him, but it just sounds like the worst thing in the world to negotiate with him and his father. I don't know. You'd never put money on Eubank ever fighting.
As well, so
but sure. I mean, apart from take Canelo out, maybe even Golovkin, he probably generates more money than
100%.
Guys. And that's the reason he's always going to be in there. He's got a fan friendly style, Whether that's enough to really, I don't believe it's probably not enough to compete with the elites, in the divisions. But commercially, he's just up there. He can. His name resonates, and that's always good enough. That'll jump the queue. I think him and Ryder was being talked about as a fight before Ryder Saunders was made.
Yeah.
That'd be a great fight, probably to watch. Obviously, no belt on the line. Maybe the IBO, but good fight for Ryder, and great fight to watch.
Okay, let's skip on now. Later on Saturday night, Deontay Wilder pretty much lost 6 rounds and then found that right hand at the end of the 7th to knock out Luis Ortiz and keep alive his rematch with Tyson Fury, which we believe is still scheduled for February 22nd. George, it was, for 6 rounds, a very poor performance, or was it just Deontay Wilder knowing what he was doing, as he said, waiting, and listen, he got the job done, didn't he?
Yeah, I'm a Wilder fan. I'm a big Wilder fan. Lately, I've said Usyk's the best heavyweight in the world right now, but it's only because you can't really, not allowed to say Wilder after the Fury fight. But I think it might even be Wilder. He's getting beat convincingly against Ortiz, and then it's just one right hand, and it's probably the best right hand you'll see all year. What a shot. What a shot. And the only thing I feel Wilder's guilty of is waiting for that perfect shot, and that's how he's losing rounds. He's waiting for that perfect shot time and time again. I don't know much about his team, who's in his corner, who's giving him the advice, who can just liven him up in terms of being able to create the opportunities to land that right hand or any power shot he wants to land, rather than specifically waiting for it. But also, he was in with Ortiz, who's a class act. Do you know what I mean? He showed up, he was in shape, he was up for the fight. I don't know how old he is. Does anyone know how old he is? He changes his age all the time. But he looked good. He's clever, and to be the size of Ortiz and actually know how to box a bit, it will take you a long way in the heavyweight division. But I think, definitely getting beat, not doing enough to win the rounds. Got caught with a couple of shots, got caught with one early. I think Ortiz, he come in, he's dripping with sweat. He looked nice and warm and ready to go. He knows that, Wilder's just so dangerous at any moment, so you need to be switched on. And but what a shot, put him away. And even once Ortiz is up, he looked like he didn't know where he was. He was confused. What a right hand. And I think that's just that set the fear of God into anyone in the heavyweight division.
Declan, there are plenty of memes going around of Wilder's wild technique, but actually it was as George said, a perfect shot, set up with the jab, right hand down the pipe.
Yeah, you can't say he can't box anymore, because he clearly can. He gave away the rounds because he was so confident that he was going to land something, and that comes down to his training team. JD's he's been with since he walked in the gym in Tuscaloosa. But Jay knew that he needed a little bit of help, so he got Mark Breland in, and Breland's been working with him for years now. And you can see the little bit of finesse that Breland's given him. Another tall, long, quite skinny guy, but can get a lot of pop behind, particularly the straight 1-2. And that was what we saw, and that really is what Wilder's built his name on. And yeah, you mentioned the memes and stuff, because he is the absolute perfect tonic for our sort of generation of Twitter and Instagram, because forget what happened in the first 6 rounds. All that people are seeing, actually, if they wake up on Sunday morning and haven't watched the fight, is that 10 seconds. There's all sorts of brilliant ones of him punching Ortiz and Ortiz ending up on the moon and stuff like that. It's absolutely magic, and people love that. And really, that's what gets other eyeballs onto the sport. People who don't necessarily watch it all the time. It's pure excitement. It's that, I hate to say it, but it is that sort of Mike Tyson factor where it's excitement all the time. You think, oh, when's a Wilder fight? What's he going to do next? Because it's taken him a long time, hasn't it, to really get any recognition or anything outside. Like, I went to Tuscaloosa into his camp and spent some time there, and really not that many people know him even there. Like, they're saying, what you here for? I'm like, I'm with the heavyweight champion. They've got no idea. It's an American football town. So hopefully now he's established, I think that was 10 consecutive title defenses or something like that. He's arguably number 1 in the division. Certainly, he's someone you can never really properly pick against, because I would pick Tyson Fury to beat him on the 22nd of February, I think, now, if I put money on it. but you can never really say it with any certainty because it just takes that. It's like he says, the opponent has to be perfect for 12 rounds. He has to be perfect for 1 second, and that is absolutely bang on. And really, that's what people want to see in this day and age.
Of course, that fight is already set, we believe, for February. Odds, Fury is the favourite, 8-13. Wilder 5-4 with a draw, very unlikely at 25.
Well, you say that.
So,
what about last time?
That's also
Made a
true.
few quid on that.
Well, that's true. I take that back. George, has your perception of that fight changed given Wilder's performance?
Well, if you look at Wilder's last 2 fights, so you have Brazil, who knocked out, straight away. Was it first or second round? First round. And then this Ortiz fight. Now, Fury are probably looking at this and looking at the first 6 rounds and be like, this is how I'm going to frustrate him, nullify him, outbox him, and then likely doesn't really want to watch the 7th round. He's got up off the floor against Wilder before Fury. But I'm not so sure. I'm going to go... I think Wilder beats him in the rematch because Fury has a fantastic ability of getting in people's heads before fight. He frustrates them. He acts the full... I think he's hard to take seriously to a certain degree if he was an opponent facing Fury beforehand. So much stuff comes out of his mouth that, it can almost be... it is confusing if he was an opponent of his. But I feel like Wilder's had that they've got that experience now, and he knows he can hurt him, and maybe won't fall for so many of the tricks and attacks to creep through the fight. He's had two good fights, and obviously the Ortiz fight is a good fight to have momentum going into a fight with Fury. Whereas Fury, on the other hand, he's had 2 soft touches. And a wrestling match. So I don't know. I haven't seen the wrestling match yet. I don't know if there was some sticky moments or not. If he had to slip and slide, I think if it does come off, I'm gonna say I believe Wilder wins.
Is it as simple, Declan, as you're in one of 2 camps? Either Wilder lands that right hand, or Fury manages to stay out of his way for 12 rounds. I mean, is it almost the same as that first fight?
Basically, yeah. But I think you can be in both camps and say, well, yeah, I fancy Fury will beat him, but you can't really rule it out, can you? It was the same when they were talking about Wilder Joshua. A lot of people would have picked Joshua, but you know that if he lands, it's all over, and that's what's exciting about it. I'd never thought that. It's funny that Wilder now will have been through all that with Fury because he'd never really had that before in his career. They had a little bit of back and forth with Stavern, but it's a different level with Fury. He's so in your face and saying all sorts of weird stuff, calling him a dosser. He didn't even know what it meant. He probably still doesn't.
But he was really light, wasn't he, Wilder?
I think he was ill, maybe, in the build-up, but yeah.
And he did. I just felt like he didn't seem right in that first Fury fight. And maybe he'd taken Fury lightly. He'd come off a long layoff, and he didn't look sensational in boxing out of the copper box or something like that on a Frank Warren bill. Might have took him too lightly, and he does have trouble at times to pull the trigger. He thinks he's going to come, and it don't. And Fury probably better than anyone else at nullifying those sort of attacks.
Yeah.
So
the only other person that took him the distance was Domin Stavern, and look what happened in the rematch. I know Stavern was out of shape, but that was a 1-round job. That was a 30-second job. Now, I'm not suggesting that can happen, but what it does show is that Wilder does learn something from his opponent, does download something in there somewhere, and whether that means he can solve a puzzle like Fury, because that's what he is it remains to be seen. But I do think he's going to land a couple times again, just like he did in the first fight. Will Fury do an Undertaker again? Because that was touch and go, wasn't it? A lot of refs would have called that off, and then it's a stoppage and the fight is over. We're not even talking about this, but all he needs to do is keep him down for 1 more second, another 2 seconds, which he can, because look at Ortiz trying to get up there. It's, no matter how good or how much heart Fury's got, if he gets hit properly, then it's over, and he knows that. He's not stupid. Can he stay out of the way for 12 rounds? He couldn't in the first fight, so. It would suggest it will go down again at some point. It will get caught something, you would think, but it's a great fight. It's so good because we've sort of danced around all the big heavyweight fights, and we're getting this one again. It's great for the division.
Yeah. Well, we have 3 months to debate that one. Coming up next, we look at Carl Frampton's return to the ring in Las Vegas on Saturday. So, a relatively quiet weekend this weekend in boxing ahead of obviously Anthony Joshua against Andy Ruiz in a fortnight. But Carl Frampton fights the first time in almost a year. He takes on Tyler McCreary in Las Vegas. His last fight, of course, Josh Warrington went the distance. Warrington held on to his world title. Frampton's supposed to fight Emmanuel Dominguez in August, but for a man who's very, susceptible to freak injuries, an ornament fell on his head in a hotel lobby, and that fight was off. George, is Callum Frampton someone who can still? Does he still? Well, he does still have world title aspirations, rightly so.
I'm not sure. Like I think he this fight now is being billed at super feather. He's never going to have a chance, I don't believe, win a world title super feather. His natural style and ability suits just being as big as you can possibly be at the lighter weight. So super bantams, when he had all his success, he won a title up, I think a feather, but he couldn't compete with Josh Warrington, who is a good fighter. Obviously, he's proven that time and time again. But they're talking about his punch power. He hurt Frampton real bad in that fight, and but I don't believe Warrington's a huge fighter. He's more about volume punching. So I'm not really sure what Frampton's plans are now. He talks about becoming a world champion again, but he's also dabbles in a few other things. He likes his podcast from time to time. He's came across my path recently, so I had to have a little word with him. But I think it might just be hanging on in there. I think boxing wise to sort of carry on the status of a pro boxer. But I can't really see him winning another world title. If I'm truly honest.
Declan, Mr. McCreary, if you look at his record, he's fought at all sorts of weights. I think he's fought at 143. His last win was a split decision over Jesse Rosales at lightweight. Jesse Rosales was beaten by Shakur Stevenson in 4 rounds at featherweight. So he's moved up and down. It seems to me like this is he's been fed to Frampton to then set up a world title shot next year.
Yeah, he's a decent opponent. He's undefeated, I think 16-1, the one being a draw. He doesn't seem to be particularly hard to find. He holds his feet a lot after he's landed, which is perfect for Frampton, who's got a good judge of distance. I see Frampton just getting in and out, peppering him, possibly stopping him. If he's on the top of his game, that's what should happen, I guess. But I believe Top Rank have just signed Tyler McCreary. So whether that was just really for this fight and then options, rather than them thinking, right, let's get him in because we're going to back him when we think he's the next star. I think it's more like you say, feeding him to Frampton as such. I thought the whole point of this card, which has also got Oscar Valdez on, was a showcase for the pair of them, and then they'd fight each other. But now we're hearing about Jamal Herring instead. So I guess that represents a belt. But I still want to see Valdez Frampton. I have since they were both champions, and both they seem to be, that they obviously both lost since then. Valdez, he was injured badly against Scott Quigg, so he had a little layoff. Yeah. So he's not at the top, and he's not the big prospect that he was, or that big star. But that's a great fight. I think it's just a massive war for the pair of them. Whether it's got a belt on the line or not, I don't think they need it. But I guess, I don't know whether it's part of the deal with Top Rank that they've guaranteed a world title shot at some point, and that's why they're going the Herring route instead, or whether the Valdez fight will come if they're both successful on Saturday night. But I think Frampton's still got some, well, it's clearly big money on the table from Top Rank because he got that deal and he got big aspirations. Super feather seems like quite a high, it's a hard division for him in terms of size. Not sure where. Jamal Herring would look a lot bigger than him, I think, on scales. It's hard to say, but I expect him to win this fight reasonably comfortably, and then in America they'll see him, and then who knows? That's a big fight for him, Herring. But I'd rather see the Valdez fight, title or not.
Well, Frampton is 25-1 on with Betfair on Saturday, which pretty much says it all. In the final section, we will take a look at what is making the news in boxing this week. So another big fight week and another big announcement from Floyd Mayweather, who's making apparently his, 13th comeback from retirement. He claims he'll fight twice next, or the reports are that he will fight twice next year, including against someone from the UFC in a boxing fight. But let's start with the question, George, of whether you believe it. Do you expect to see Mr. Mayweather in a ring?
Yeah, well, there's 2 reasons why I believe Floyd would want to come out. One, he might be a bit skint, which is surprising, but it's always mooted about. You earn big money, you spend big money, or he's sad that people are starting to not talk about him so much. He's being a bit forgotten. No doubt he's still in tremendous shape and tremendous form. He's posted some pictures. he probably can come back and compete. But it is the umpteenth time he's come out of retirement. It's only so many times. I think people will really, really want to hear it. And having the McGregor fight sort of pushed him out of that sort of boxing circle now. I'm not sure. I mean, Pacquiao back on top maybe. But if anything, I'd like to see him in a UFC match. Maybe get him in a UFC match. There's something different. I'd like to see, something created. He's in with Dana White. Whether he does boxing and the guy does, wrestling or UFC or something, that could be interesting. Who knows? But I appreciate Mayweather, but I've never been the biggest fan of his in terms of he created a genre of winning, and winning's enough when before winning just wasn't enough. You had to knock people out. You had to be that kind of fighter to be generating the amount of money that he was and being that famous. So if he comes back, he's probably taking an opportunity away from some other more exciting fighters. Or what I would, my style of my style of fighting. So, but this could go on forever, couldn't it? Because he doesn't seem to get old, does he? So he'll probably come back, have a couple of fights, spend the money, come back again. Who knows?
Do we want to see him back, Declan?
I think there'd be enough appetite for him, and therefore enough money to tempt him out of retirement. I don't think we're gonna see him jump in with Errol Spence or Terence Crawford or anything like that. We saw that in his career, certainly towards the latter stages. He's not going to do something that he doesn't want to do, like the last fight, what was supposed to be his last fight, and he picked Andre Berto instead of about 10 other fighters everyone would rather see him in against. So I would see him could come out and have an easy one. I honestly would pick him against just about every other welterweight in the world now, even the two top guys. Probably below that, again, we've got a list here: Pacquiao, Porter, Garcia, Thurman, all those names who were in the mix when he was boxing. I'd still pick him to beat him, even after however long, because he's been in the gym. It's not really, it's in his head, isn't it? It's not necessarily what's going on with his body, which anyway is in great shape, but it's more about what he can do with his head now intelligently. So I'd still pick him to win. I guess he could come back and box anyone and he'll make money out of it. They're talking about May and September, so we're straight away going at Cinco de Mayo, Cinco de Mayweather, and then the Mexican Independence. So it's money on the table in Vegas every single time, excuse the pun. And then we've got Khabib Nurmagomedov in there as well, which is just what he did against McGregor. And we know now there's no way on earth that a UFC fighter could beat Mayweather in a boxing match. It's not going to happen. And he fooled everyone the first time into thinking that it might happen. It's not going to happen. So that is the last thing I want to see, because I'd rather see him come back and have a proper fight. Like remember when he came back or it might have not been first time, he came back and he boxed Marquez, had a proper fight. Not a great weight for Marquez that time, but that's what I want to see him come back and do. I'd love to see that, and he'd make a lot of money doing that, but he'd be making a lot of money against anyone. And I think you're right, what's happened is you spend money like he does, and you're not getting 100 million in your account twice a year. It soon dwindles. I haven't seen his accounts recently, but I'm pretty sure he's not skint. But you want that, well, especially when you walk around with a backpack full of it. Yeah. I mean, I do as well, but that's all I've got. That's my savings I carry around. I'm too precious with it. But I reckon we'll see him back. I don't think this is a hoax. I saw his old man said he hopes he doesn't come back, so that probably means he is coming back.
And Pacquiao is still a champion. He had a good win against Keith Thurman, so it's a legitimate fight, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if he's talking about more than one fight, then it might not be Pacquiao first, because that might be something that needs to be set up, because there will be an appetite for that.
Do you see him beating Pacquiao? Rather, do you see Pacquiao beating him after what happened in the first fight?
Yeah. No. I mean, it's all on Mayweather's terms. You know, I'd like to see him fight Alvarez at light heavyweight. Do you know what I mean? But it's not going to happen, is it? It's going to be on Mayweather's terms. He boxed Alvarez and soundly beat him, but it was down at a weight that was into Alvarez with rehydration clauses, etc. So I think his nose is probably put out of joint now that all this money that's on the table for these guys, for the heavyweights, for Alvarez and others, that he's like, well, I still got to show everyone I'm the main man. And good on him to still have that in him at his age. And But yeah, it'll come back. If it's more than one fight, then it's a soft touch. He just probably wants to upset Alvarez and steal his Mexican holiday date, and then there'll be the rumor mill will be flying for whatever is the fight that people actually want to see.
I'm sure American will put his name in the hat for the.
Yeah.
Maybe they could do that in Saudi, because then they get a whole heap of money. That's something that's the sort of place, because now we're sort of seeing that actually, unless you're doing like 1 million buys, you're better off being on DAZN and getting DAZN money guaranteed, aren't you? Rather than pay-per-view. Eddie Hearn was right that pay-per-view is dying because of this over-the-top streaming services that we're seeing. But it's a totally different realm in Saudi, where they've got this other money. It doesn't relate to ticket sales or anything like that. They just got money.
Yeah.
And if they love Amir Khan, and they'd obviously love Floyd Mayweather, so maybe that would be the key and the recipe to getting him out, giving him just, here you go, mate, $75 million or whatever, and cash. You ain't got to worry about ticket sales, and then maybe we'd see it. And then Khan would be the obvious one. Imagine we finally see Khan Mayweather. It'd be unbelievable. Yeah.
Well, Khan is 8-1 to be Mayweather's first opponent back. Manny Pacquiao 6-4 favourite with Betfair. Sean Porter 5-1. Danny Garcia and Keith Thurman 6-1. That is all for this week. We'll of course be back next week to look back at Carl Frampton's fight, but mainly ahead to Anthony Joshua against Andy Ruiz, the rematch in Saudi Arabia.